Hello there guys, it's Joey and this video is going to be talking about the Nordic God Thor. This is a requested video for some requested items which we will touch on upon the end, as well as mythos and talking a little bit about the evolutionary process. So first and foremost, I apologise if you can hear the noise pollution. It wasn't very much of it on the last video I made, however it is 8 AM and they're already out there, and I had got in the shower and got ready ASAP to try and beat them to it, but it's 8 AM and they're already making a load of noise, so I don't know how much of it you can hear, and I apologise for that. It's driving me crazy, so there you go. So apologies for that. If you can hear it, I really don't want to put music on in the background. I find it distracting from the overall video. So if there's the occasional beep that you can hear, then I apologise for that. So the request for the Nordic God Thor had a few caveats, quid pro quos. It had to feel like an energy of a big strong hug with flicks of red, thunderstorms and that electric sexual chargedness, the protective male aspect, god aspect, metallic, especially bronze. And some other key themes to the Nordic God Thor are courage, law, order, defense, protection, storms. He's the god of thunder. He's the archetype of a loyal, honourable warrior, the ideal to which mortals aspire to be. Courage is his middle name pretty much, and has an unshakable duty. So I had a look at some of the key themes now and myths. So the thing about the Nordic God Thor is there is a lot of mythos about him. He's one of the most prominent perhaps of the Nordic gods, perhaps second only to Odin, and there is a lot of mythos about him. One of the most famous is included in Hymir's poem. The gods organise a feast and the giant Aegir is requested to prepare it. Aegir agrees but requests an enormous cauldron which can be obtained from the giant Hymir. Thor accepts the task of getting the cauldron and sets off on his adventure. In the middle of his mission, they get involved in a fishing expedition. This is when Thor almost catches the world serpent Humanure. I think it's, hang on, let me double check. I did look it up and now I can't remember because of the noise outside. There we go, noise outside. Right, tell me how to pronounce it, iPad. Jörmungandr. 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 Because I know people get funny about pronunciations every time we make one of these videos, so there we go. And let's go back to that myth because it's interesting. I find the kind of world serpent imagery and about the snake devouring its own tail, Ouroboros, very cross-pantheon and interesting. The brave and famous Hymir caught 2 whales on his hook at once, and back in the stern the kinsman of Odin, Thor, cunningly laid out his line. The protector of humans, the slayer of the serpent, baited his hook with the ox's head. He whom the gods hate, the circumscriber beneath all lands, gaped at the bait. Then very bravely Thor, the courageous one, pulled the gleaming serpent up on board. With his hammer he struck the head violently, from above the wolf's hideous brother. The sea wolf shrieked, and under the water rocks re-echoed. All the ancient earth was collapsing, then the fish sank into the sea. The poetic Edda, Hymir's poem, Hymirskvide 21:24. And another interesting myth is there is a story where Asgard, the realm of the Norse gods, is damaged during a war between the gods. One of the giants offers to help to rebuild the walls of Asgard and commits to do it in a short period of time. The gods accept the offer, thinking it would be impossible to carry out the task on time, and in return the giant is promised the sun, the moon and even the goddess Freya. The giant almost succeeds in delivering results on time, so Thor decides to break the promise and kills the giant. Thor alone struck a blow there, swollen with rage. He seldom sits still when he hears such things said. The oaths broke apart in the world, and the promises, all the solemn pledges which had passed between them. The poetic Edda, seeress's prophecy, Vulspa 26. And of course, the Norse mythology claims that Thor, along with most of the gods, will eventually die during a disaster. It is said during the end of the world, known as Ragnarok, Thor will fight against the world serpent. Then the glorious son of Earth, Odin's son, advances to fight against the serpent in his wrath. The defender of Earth strikes. All men must leave their homesteads. 9 steps Fjögn's child takes, with difficulty, from the serpent of whom scorn is never spoken. The god slays the serpent, but he will die well in the beast's poison. Is a side note here. From the poetic Edda, Seeress's prophecy, Voluspa 56, and so on. So there are a lot of mythoses, and to cover them all in great detail would be a really long video, and I really wanted to touch on the energies that interacted when coming forth with this set, but really something else really piqued my interest as well. So I'm going to talk about that first, then we'll show the products and talk a little bit about those energies that came forward. First and foremost, as with all the Nordic gods, I ended up cut and bleeding with this set. And this happens for every single Nordic god the first time I create a set or an energy for them. And with Freya, every time without fail. Blood sacrifice for Nordic gods, every single time. It's really, it's a really unusual quirk of kind of like this blood and honor thing that happens with the Nordic gods. So, when reading about the ancient myths, it seems almost impossible to ignore the fact that modern portrayals of Thor come to the forefront. And unfortunately, some of these modern interpretations of myths actually get in the way of the ancient myths, because you'll find people who have quoted things which are actually from comic books and movies and things, and it's like, that's a modern interpretation of Thor, not the actual ancient mythos. Now, I'm an evolutionary. I think that gods evolve and they become present and more relevant in keeping with modern themes. I don't think they're stagnant. I don't think it would be a good thing for them to be stagnant. I think keeping them in the way that our ancestors saw them and interacted with them is limiting. And I, for one, think that whilst lore and mythos is very important and very interesting, because I'm a student of history, for goodness sake, you know, up to degree level, I find it fascinating. But I think it is important to acknowledge that we are not our ancestors. We are not living like our ancestors. We do not see concepts the same as our ancestors. We have changed, we've adapted. Some would argue we've evolved, some would argue that we go back, depending on your point of view in certain circumstances. However, I find it really interesting that gods, particularly of warfare and the courageous, loyal, heroic warrior archetype, are those that really come up time and time again. I think this has a lot to do with human nature, because we aspire to be better than we are. And that's true across culture and in sort of mythos and literature and common psyche, I guess, that most people seek to be better than they are, and to have a archetype of a warrior that we can look up to, such as a god, such as Thor, is a really powerful motivator. And obviously I've talked a little bit about this in Evolutionary Process with the goddess Morrigan, and they have kind of similar themes of loyal courage, honor. There is oaths coming up to the forefront in both, and what a warrior means by their sworn oath, and so on and so forth. Now, with the Celtic mythos, the guys tend to be, when they're broken, this is a very, very negative thing, but as we saw, kind of Thor steps in to prevent a oath from a giant being fulfilled, because it would have cost too much. So there's a discrepancy a little bit, but I think there is a similarity between energies of Celtic and Nordic gods in particular. The relevance and popularity of these warrior gods such as Thor and the evolutionary process shows them on how eternal they are, how present they are, how they are always relevant, how certain gods tap into parts of our humanity. And because that never changes so much as how it adapts, these gods continue to evolve alongside with us. The idea of the honourable warrior is still as important today as it was back then. The way that we have viewed warfare, the way that we enact warfare, and the way we see what a warrior is, perhaps, has changed a great deal from Nordic conquests, Viking conquests, Celtic skirmishes, border skirmishes and conquest, and that kind of honour, to what it is now. And it tends to be a little bit more displaced now. People look for a warrior archetype in terms of perhaps law enforcement. There is a very broad divide now because there is a distancing from what warriors were back then to what warriors are now, and kind of like them facing life and death and bloodshed every day, to what we see now, which is very little bloodshed for most of us in this side of the world, in the Western world. It's not that we don't ever see it, and it's not that some people don't face life and death. It tends to be more of a law enforcement thing, or soldiers going overseas, but people tend to look for warrior archetypes within perhaps legal justice these days, or those forms of justice that are more applicable to most people. And then some people have a huge problem with that, but that's another video entirely. But the idea that Thor evolves and has come to the forefront in two ways that I think really show the complexity of the god Thor is there's the whole Marvel universe, which is a comic-based universe that has become popular again through film. And obviously Thor and the whole Nordic god that sort of stems into that is based on Nordic mythology. You've got all of the gods there, and they are fairly true to source material. It's obviously a comic book movie. It obviously interjects the idea of they're just from a different world and they're far, far more advanced, so it appears like magic to human beings. So it kind of takes a twist on the mythology and then presents it in a modern fashion for a modern audience and keeps gods relevant in that fashion. And then there is Vikings, a TV show, which presents Vikings as perhaps they were, probably more idealised, probably more stylised, probably a lot more supermodel pretty. But they do present the Nordic gods through the Viking show, and that's perhaps in a more original form of worship. And that, you know, that they have temples, they have seers, they have people that they believe to be witches, the Vulspa, and they do have these supernatural events which are attributed to the gods. And there's a really nice line where Rollo, in I think it's the latest series, he's converted to Christianity, and he originally did it just to become king of France and marry the daughter of the king of France. And he says to her that you may only hear thunder, but in my heart I also hear Thor's hammer. And it's an interesting portrayal of the Nordic gods into modern mythos, which a lot of us really enjoy this TV show, and I think it's interesting how honourable warrior gods kind of eke into modern consciousness in all these different ways. And I honestly feel that they're enduring. The gods, the pagan gods, Nordic gods, and, you know, Celtic gods as well, but pagan gods are enduring because they just evolve. They become more relevant as we fight battles that shift, but they are still battles. Like we have battles for the environment right now going on with, say, the Dakota Pipe access line and things like that. These things still matter to us, and the defense of land is a very key theme which ties to the Nordic root or the Celtic root, because of the tying to the land, because of land was what was fought for. Now we might be fighting for what we consider to be the soul of the land and the continuation of the land and the refusal to allow overt pollution and death to the land, rather than perhaps marking territory. But it's still a fight for earth and land, and I think these themes kind of cross boundaries of time and culture, and so they kind of evolve. Those causes evolve with us as humans and human beings and humanity, and therefore the gods that really resonate strongly with those themes of the courage and the warrior and being better kind of evolve alongside with those themes, and those gods stay relevant and paganism continues to grow. It's also worth noting it was quite large news, it was newsworthy on a large scale, not just in pagan circles, about the rebuilding of temples to the Nordic god in Iceland in particular. So the old ways, I hesitate to say this, but like the old ways are coming back. Now, I don't particularly agree with saying that, because I don't think we live or worship or see or feel the same way our ancestors did. I think to try and do that is counterproductive to human time. I think that our ancestors lived and died so that we could live, and to pretend that we are them is kind of dishonoring their memory in my mind. It's like what they lived with, what they had, they evolved with what they had, they embraced the world as it was then, and for us to refuse to do that in our time kind of is counterintuitive to what they did and the lives that they led, and the kind of evolutionary process of the human spirit, as well as spirituality in general. So whilst working with this particular energy, Thor was reasonably quiet, reasonably stoic, reasonably I think stoic is probably the right word, actually. There was the blood sacrifice thing, the cut the finger, and I was like, I'm bleeding. I know it's a Nordic set. And there was this energies. There was a humour to it as well, though. I will say there was a stoicness, but then there was also kind of like this rolling, booming, laughing, and this kind of thundery energy to it. It was kind of energized but stoic. So it's kind of like, you know, do your thing, and I will approve or not at the end. But I had a very clear idea of where I wanted the energies to go and feel for the Nordic god Thor. Not least of all because of the involvement of the lady who said it is. And I think I'll just show you. Okay, so the pillar is this pillar, and hopefully you can see it on top. Okay, so hopefully it will come out all right, but the wax is a kind of rust blood red colour. It literally is a rusty, coppery blood red colour, and it is mixed to be this colour. This is took me some time to get the shade that I wanted. It was a sort of process, and the top has copper and gold with a tiny little splash of purple, which is in this and the 3 votives. I'm only going to show 1 votive, but there are 3 as requested. So again, this is the votive, so you can see the little purple, and hopefully you can see there's a little bit of a hexagonal glitter going on, and base in copper, and that's copper was kind of requested, and the flashes of red were requested, so there is a flash of red glitter in the top here. I'm sure you can probably see, but I wanted it to be armor. I wanted it to feel like it was the Nordic gods Thor's armor, his long flowing red hair and kind of like copper bronze armor, and that kind of shine into battle. The candles in particular made me think of him standing, the sun rising, he's on a hill, he's kind of got this you know, his helmet on, but you can still see his beard and his copper, and he's standing there. He's very, very stoic as the light begins to shine on him prior to battle, and the copper armor is shining. I'm got bronzy copper armor. I mean, it's not made of copper, it's the color. But that kind of shimmer and shine as he prepares for battle. He's very, very elevated, very on a hill, and then there's kind of like this blood of the blood pumping and the warrior, and the essence of what it is to be a warrior in one's blood, in one's very life energy. And we have the oil. The oil and the smudge are a little bit more battlefield-esque. They are meant to feel like the essence of a battlefield for at war, as warriors do. He has a fertility element, which I found interesting. His wife Sif is considered to be a fertility goddess as well, but he does have a fertility element, so I brought a little bit more of an earthiness into this and to the smudge, which I'll show you in a moment. That's in some of his other mythos, which we haven't mentioned as much. So I did want that to be present, that kind of earth energy. And I've talked about, you know, boundaries of earth and how warrior energies are related to the earth to this day, and that kind of that evolutionary process. So I felt having his earth element in there was important, but it wasn't like the key. It was kind of like the ground upon which he stands. So, and then we have the smudge, which again, if Thor would like to pull out his mighty hammer and slam down on that thing outside, I wouldn't mind. So this is very much about scent rather than how it looks. Some of the smudges have a very, very strong physical appearance as well as the scent, but primarily scent is the defining factor in the smudges, because the idea is they're built from the nose up. I build layer upon layer of scent and herbs, and it becomes an energy matrix which is meant to evoke a sense of a certain temple. It creates an energetic temple, in this case for the Nordic god Thor. So this combines a warlike energy with the earth-like energy and looks quite a bit like a battlefield again. It actually has a similar aesthetic to the goddess Macha or Mocha's warlike warrior field. However, there is only one herb akin to both, so that's completely different in terms of scent, but in terms of like physical, it looks again like a battlefield, like blood on the ground. And for Thor's energies for building a temple, it's again resolute. It's a strength and a determinedness, even a doggedness, a refusal to back down, a refusal to be defeated. Yeah, okay, that was like a surge of energy that just went all the way through. Okay, so it definitely has this masculine element to it, this godlike energy, this stoicism, but it's in sort of in a sense of duty, like creating a temple which is about duty and honor and courage. There is kind of like, it's almost, I get the sense of like sitting on a battlefield, and there's kind of two energies to it. There's kind of like the prior to battle of the stratagem, and like sitting on the edges of the battlefield and building up to victory and warlike energies and deciding and stratagem and how best to defeat the enemy. And then there is this energy of following the battle, of kind of like sat on the battle looking out, and there's a lot of defeated enemies and a lot of blood and a lot of that kind of stuff, and that kind of sense of victory and power and celebration following. It's very masculine. It's perhaps the most masculine smudge I've ever created. Have we had a god smudge before? We must have had a god smudge before. Yeah, we have. But this is almost the essence of masculinity in a way. Like, Thor is so masculine. That sounds weird to say out loud, but he is so prolifically masculine, if that makes sense. You know, he is the archetype of this perfect male, this perfect warrior, this perfect honourable guy. He's also very lusty and sexual, but not in kind of like a derogatory way. It's kind of just like being full of life and vitality way. It's amazing. I really like it. So yeah, so that's the smudge. And lastly, I was asked to do a powder, and it actually ended up being a salt, which I hope is okay. I'm sorry if you can hear this noise. Please shut up. So this is a completely natural red dyed salt that I did myself. It has a combination of salt in here. I'm really sorry. I thought we would get through without quite that much noise. If you can't hear it, then all well and good, because people couldn't hear it on the video last time, but it's a lot worse today, and I'm guessing it's going to continue all week, so I've got no choice but try and video it and hope that you can't hear it. Anyway, so I created the salt, so I was really chuffed with how this came out. It's a really strong, vibrant colour from all natural ingredients, no synthetics or anything like that. And it has its own scent actually. So this is a power salt. I'm actually going to keep everything up on store. All of these things are going to go up on store if people want some in future. This is a power salt. This is obviously a warrior salt, and red salt can be used in rituals of honouring gods, particularly Thor obviously, but honouring warrior gods. It can be used in rituals of attack and defence. It can be used for victory in all circumstances, so, you know, legal battles, you've got a situation at work you need to overcome, you've got a personal situation you need to overcome, you need a bit more vitality, you need a bit more courage, you need a little bit more of an oomph, you need to create a barrier around a certain situation so nobody can take your courage or victory away from you. Kind of that protective defense warrior energy. So, you know, you could have a candle for you or a petition for you in the middle and create a boundary around it using warrior god Thor salt. So again, there we go. So that's it for this video before the noise gets really bad again, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope the lady likes her items, and that's it for this video. Many blessings.